once I was a real turtle.
There must be more to come.
When we were little, we went to school in the sea. The master was an old turtle. We used to call him Tortoise.
Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one?
We called him Tortoise because he taught us. Really, you are very dull.
You ought to be ashamed of yourself for asking such a simple question.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
Drive on, old fellow. Don't be all day about it.
Yes. We went to school in the sea, though you mayn't believe it.
I never said I didn't.
You did.
Hold your tongue.
We had the best of educations. In fact, we went to school every day.
I've been to a day school too. You needn't be so proud as all that.
With extras.
Yes, we learned French and music.
And washing?
Certainly not.
Ah, then yours wasn't a really good school. Now at ours they had at the end of the bill French, music and washing. Extra.
You couldn't have wanted it much, living at the bottom of the sea.
Oh, I couldn't afford to learn it. I only took the regular course.
What was that?
Reeling and writhing, of course, to begin with, and then the different branches of arithmetic. Ambition, distraction, uglification and derision.
I never heard of uglification. What is it?
Never heard of uglifying? You know what to beautify is, I suppose?
Yes, it means to make anything prettier.
Well, then, if you don't know what to uglify is, you are a simpleton.
Oh. What else had you to learn?
Well, there was mystery, ancient and modern, with seaography. Then drawling. The drawling master was an old conger eel that used to come once a week. He taught us drawling, stretching and fainting in coils.
What was that like?
Well, I can't show it you myself, I'm too stiff. And the Griffin never learnt it.
Hadn't time. I went to the classical master, though. He was an old crab, he was.
Oh, I never went to him. He taught laughing and grief, they used to say.
Yes, so he did, so he did. Ah, me.
And how many hours a day did you do lessons?
10 hours the first day, 9 the next, and so on.
What a curious plan.
That's the reason they're called lessons. Because they lessen from day to day.
Oh, really? Then the 11th day must have been a holiday.
Of course it was.
And how did you manage on the 12th?
That's enough about lessons. Tell us something about the games now.
You may.
It's just the same as if he had a bone in his throat. I'll thump his back. There you are, old fella.
Thank you, Griffin. Thank you. Now, young lady, you may not have lived much under the sea.
I haven't.
And perhaps you were never even introduced to a lobster.
I once tasted. Oh, no, never.
So you can have no idea what a delightful thing a lobster quadrille is.
No, indeed. What sort of a dance is it?
Why, you first form into a line along the seashore.
2 lines, seals, turtles and so on. Then when you've cleared the jellyfish out of the way...
That generally takes some time.
You advance twice.
Each with a lobster as a partner.
Of course, advance twice, set to partners.
Change lobsters and retard in the same order.
Then you know you throw the
lobsters
as far out to sea as you can.
and swim after them.
Turn a somersault in the sea.
Change lobsters again.
Back to land again and... That's all the first figure.
It must be a very pretty dance.
Would you like to see a little of it?
Very much indeed.
Come, let's try the first figure. We can do it without lobsters, you know. Which shall sing?
Oh, you sing. I've forgotten the words.
So the Mock Turtle and the Griffin began solemnly dancing round and round Alice and waving their forepaws to mark the time, while the Mock Turtle sang very slowly and sadly.
Will you walk a little faster, said a whiting to a snail. There's a porpoise close behind us and he's treading on my tail. See how eagerly the lobsters and the turtles all advance. They are waiting on the shingle, will you come and join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? Will you, won't you, will you, won't you join the dance? You can really have no notion how delightful it will be when they take us up and throw us with the lobsters out to sea. Yeah. But the snail replied, too far, and gave a look askance. Said he thanked the whiting kindly, but he would not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not join the dance. Would not, could not, would not, could not join the dance.
Thank you, it's a very interesting dance to watch. And I do so like that curious song about the whiting.
You know why it's called a whiting?
I never thought about it. Why?
It does the boots and shoes.
Does the boots and shoes?
Why, what are your shoes done with? I mean, what makes them so shiny?
They're done with boot blacking, I believe.
Boots and shoes under the sea are not done with blacking. They are done with whiting. Now you know.
And what are the boots and shoes made of?
Soles and heels, of course. Any shrimp could have told you that.
If I'd been the whiting, I'd have said to the porpoise, "Keep back, please. We don't want you with us."
They were obliged to have him with them. No wise fish would go anywhere without a porpoise.
Wouldn't it really?
Of course not. Why, if a fish came to me and told me he was going a journey, I should say, with what purpose?
Don't you mean purpose?
I mean what I say.
Come, let's hear some of your adventure.
So Alice began telling them her adventures from the time when she first saw the white rabbit. She was a little nervous about it just at first. The two creatures got so close to her, one on each side, and opened their eyes and mouths so very wide. But she gained courage as she went on. Her listeners were perfectly quiet till she got to the part about her repeating, "You are old, Father William," to the caterpillar, and the words all coming different. And then the mock turtle drew a long breath.
Oh, that's very curious.
It's all about as curious as it can be.
Well, I don't really know.
It all came different. I should like to hear her repeat something now. Tell her to begin.
Stand up and repeat. "'Tis the voice of the sluggard."
How these creatures order one about. I might as well be at school at once. But my head's so full of the lobster quadrille that I hardly know what I shall say.
Come on, begin.
"'Tis the voice of the lobster. I heard him declare, 'You have baked me too brown. I must sugar my hair.' As a duck with its eyelids, so he with his nose trims his belt and his buttons, and turns out his toes. When the sands are all dry, he is gay as a lark, and will talk in contemptuous tones of the shark. But when the tide rises and sharks are around, his voice has a timid and tremulous sound."
That's different from what I used to say when I was a child.
Well, I never heard it before, but it sounds uncommon nonsense. I should like to have it explained.
She can't explain it.
What is the use of repeating all that stuff if you don't explain it as you go on? It's by far the most confusing thing I ever heard.
Yes, I think you'd better leave off.
Very well, I don't mind.
Shall we try another figure of the lobster quadrille? Or would you like the mock turtle to sing you another song?
Oh, a song, please, if the mock turtle would be so kind.
No accounting for tastes. Sing her turtle soup, will you, old fellow?
Beautiful soup, so rich and green, waiting in a hot tureen. Who for such dainties would not stoop? Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Soup of the evening, beautiful beautiful, beautiful soup. Beautiful soup, who cares for fish, game, or any other dish? Who would not give all else for toup? Any worth only of beautiful soup. Pennyworth only of beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Beautiful soup. Soup of the evening. Beautiful, beautiful soup.
Chorus again!
Trial's beginning.
Come on, you can hold my hand. Quick!
What trial is it?
Come on!
What about the end of the song?
Can't wait for that! Faster!
Evening, beautiful, beautiful soup.
When Alice and the Gryphon arrived at the trial, the King and Queen of Hearts were seated on their throne, with a great crowd assembled about them, all sorts of little birds and beasts, as well as the whole pack of playing cards. The Knave of Hearts was standing before them in chains, with a soldier on each side to guard him, and near the king was the White Rabbit, dressed as a herald, with a trumpet in one hand and a scroll of parchment in the other. In the very middle of the court was a table, with a large dish of tarts upon it. They looked so good that it made Alice quite hungry to look at them.
I wish they'd get the trial finished and hand round the refreshments. Let me see. The king will be the judge. He's wearing a great wig with his crown on top of it. And that's the jury box. And those 12 creatures, I suppose, are the jurors. There's a duck, and a frog, and a squirrel, and a guinea pig, 2 guinea pigs, and a hedgehog, and a mole. And oh yes, there's Bill the lizard. Tell me, Gryphon, why are they all writing so busily on slates? They can't have anything to put down yet before the trial's begun.
They're writing down their names in case they forget them before the end of the trial.
Stupid things.
As Alice was standing just beside the jury box, she could see that all the jurors were writing down the words, stupid things, on their slates. She overheard one of them, it was Bill the lizard, saying to his neighbour, the guinea pig,
Can you tell me how to spell stupid, neighbour?
S-T-W-O-P-I-D.
Oh, thank you.
A nice muddle their slates will be in before the trial's over. But what I can't stand is that squeaky pencil.
So Alice very soon found an opportunity of taking it away. She did it so quickly that the poor little juror, it was Bill the lizard, could not make out at all what had become of it. So after hunting all about for it, he was obliged to write with one finger for the rest of the day. Now the White Rabbit stepped forward and called out,
Silence in court. Your Majesty, I will now read the accusation.
Very well.
The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts all on a summer day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts and took them quite away.
Jurors, consider your verdict.
Not yet, Your Majesty. There's a great deal to come before that.
Oh, then call the first witness.
First witness.
The first witness was the Hatter. He was followed into the court by the March Hare, arm in arm with the Dormouse. The Hatter was carrying a teacup in one hand and a piece of bread and butter in the other.
I beg pardon, Your Majesty, for bringing these in, but I hadn't quite finished my tea when I was sent for.
You ought to have finished. When did you begin?
14th of March, I think it was, wasn't it, Hare?
Oh, 15th.
16th.
Jurymen, write that down.
14, 15, 16, 4, 5, and 9, and 6, 15, 3 months of 3.
Take off your hat.
It isn't mine.
Ah, stolen. Jurors, make a note of that. He admits it isn't his hat.
I keep hats to sell. I've none of my own. I'm a hatter.
Give your evidence and don't be nervous, or I'll have you executed on the spot.
The Queen put on her spectacles and began staring hard at the Hatter, who turned pale and fidgeted. In his confusion, he bit a large piece out of his teacup instead of the bread and butter. Just at this moment, Alice felt a very curious sensation, which puzzled her a great deal until she made out what it was. She was beginning to grow larger again. The Dormouse was sitting beside Alice because he hadn't been able to find a place to sit with the March Hare.
Oh, I wish you wouldn't squeeze so I can hardly breathe. I can't help it. I'm growing. You've no right to grow here. Don't talk nonsense. You know you're growing too.
Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace, not in that ridiculous fashion.
And the Dormouse got up very sulkily and crossed over to the other side of the court. All this time the Queen had never left off staring at the Hatter.
Officer, bring me the list of the singers in the last concert. I'm sure it was the Hatter who sang Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Bat and simply murdered the time.
Oh, Your Majesty.
At this, the wretched Hatter trembled so that he shook off both his shoes.
Give your evidence, or I'll have you executed, whether you are nervous or not.
I'm a poor man, Your Majesty, and I hadn't begun my tea in not above a week or so, and what with the bread and butter getting so thin and the twinkling of the tea.
The twinkling of what?
It began with the tea.
Of course twinkling begins with a T. You take me for a dance. Go on.
I'm a poor man, and most things twinkled after that, only the March Hare said...
I didn't.
You did.
I deny it. He denies it. Leave out that part.
Well, at any rate, the Dormouse said...
The Dormouse is asleep.
After that, I got some more bread and butter.
What did the Dormouse say?
That I can't remember.
You must remember, or I'll have you executed.
Oh, Your Majesty, I'm a poor man, Your Majesty.
You're a very poor speaker.
Hooray! Hooray!
Officers of the court, suppress that guinea pig.
The officers of the court had a large canvas bag, which tied up at the mouth with strings. Into this they slipped the guinea pig head first, and then sat upon it.
Please, Your Majesty.
If that's all you know, you may stand down.
I can't go no lower. I'm on the floor as it is.
Then you may sit down.
Hooray! Hooray!
Suppress that other guinea pig.
As
As I was saying before the guinea pig interrupted, you may sit down.
I'd rather finish my tea.
You may go.
Oh, thank you, Your Majesty.
The Hatter didn't even wait to put his shoes on. He hurriedly left the court with an anxious look at the Queen, who was reading the list of singers at the concert.
And just take his head off outside. He's the one who murdered the time.
If you please, Your Majesty, he's out of sight already.
Then call the next witness.
Next witness.
The next witness was the Duchess's cook. She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was even before she got into the court by the way the people near the door began sneezing all at once.
Give your evidence.
Shut!
What am I to do now?
Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness.
Well, if I must, I must. What are tarts made of?
Pepper, mostly.
Treacle! Treacle!
Collar that Dormouse. Behead that Dormouse. Turn that Dormouse out of court. Suppress him. Lynch him. Off with his wisdom.
I'll have off with this Silence in court!
By the time they got the Dormouse turned out and had settled down again, the cook had disappeared.
Never mind. Call the next witness. Really, my dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. It quite makes my forehead ache.
Nonsense.
I wonder whom the White Rabbit will call as the next witness. They haven't got much evidence yet.
Next witness. Alice.
Here!
Alice was so surprised at hearing the White Rabbit call out her name that she quite forgot how large she'd grown in the last few minutes, and she jumped up in such a hurry that she tipped over the jury box with the edge of her skirt. All the jurymen were upset under the heads of the crowd below, and there they lay sprawling about, reminding Alice very much of a globe of goldfish she had accidentally upset the week before.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
She began picking them up as quickly as she could, for the accident of the goldfish kept running in her head, and she had a vague sort of idea that they must be collected at once and put back in the jury box or they would die.
The trial cannot proceed until all of the jurymen are back in their proper places. All of them.
Alice looked at the jury box and saw that in her haste she'd put the lizard in head downwards, and the poor little thing was waving its tail about in a melancholy way, quite unable to move. She soon got it out again and put it right.
Not that it signifies much. I should think it would be quite as much use in the trial one way up as the other.
As soon as the jury had a little recovered from the shock of being upset, and their slates and pencils had been found and handed back to them, they set to work very diligently to write out a history of the accident, all except the lizard,
who seemed too much overcome to do anything but sit with its mouth open, gazing up into the roof of the court.
What do you know about this business?
Nothing.
Nothing whatever?
Nothing whatever.
Jurors, make a note of that. That's very important.
Unimportant, Your Majesty means, of course.
Unimportant, of course, I meant. Important, unimportant, unimportant, important.
Some of the jury wrote it down important and some unimportant. Alice could see this as she was near enough to look over their slates.
But it doesn't matter a bit, really.
The king had for some time been busily writing in his notebook.
Silence! Rule 42. All persons more than a mile high to leave the court.
That means you.
I'm not a mile high.
You are?
Nearly 2 miles high.
Well, I shan't go at any rate. Besides, that's not a regular rule. You invented it just now.
It's the oldest rule in the book.
Then it ought to be number 1.
Oh, well, anyhow, jurors, consider your verdict.
There's more evidence to come yet, please, Your Majesty. This paper has just been picked up.
What is in it?
I haven't opened it yet, but it seems to be a letter written by the prisoner to somebody.
It must have been that, unless it was written to nobody, which isn't usual, you know.
Who is it addressed to?
It isn't addressed at all. In fact, there's nothing written on the outside. It isn't a letter after all. It's a set of verses.
Oh, are they in the prisoner's handwriting?
No, they're not. That's the queerest thing about it.
He must have imitated somebody else's hand. Knave of Hearts, what have you to say about this?
Please, Your Majesty, I didn't write it, and they can't prove I did. There's no name signed at the end.
If you didn't sign it, that only makes the matter worse. You must have meant some mischief, or else you'd have signed your name like an honest man.
That proves his guilt, of course. So off with...
It doesn't prove anything of the sort. Why, you don't even know what the verses are about.
Read them.
Where shall I begin, please, Your Majesty?
Begin at the beginning, and go on till you come to the end. Then stop.
They told me you had been to her and mentioned me to him. She gave me a good character, but said I could not swim. He sent them word I had not gone, we know it to be true. If she should push the matter on, what would become of you? I gave her 1, they gave him 2, you gave us 3 or more. They all returned from him to you, though they were mine before.
Aha! That's the most important piece of evidence we've heard yet. So now let the jury...
If any one of them can explain it, I'll give him 6pence. I don't believe there's an atom of meaning in it.
If there's no meaning in it, that saves a world of trouble, you know, as we needn't try to find any. And yet I don't know. I seem to see some meaning in them after all. Said I could not swim. Knave of Hearts, you can't swim, can you?
Do I look like it?
All right so far. We know it to be true. That's the jury, of course. If she should push the matter on, that must be the Queen, what would become of you? What indeed? I gave her 1, they gave him 2. Why, that must be what the Knave of Hearts did with the tarts, you know.
But it goes on. They all returned from him to you.
Nothing can be clearer than that. Why, there are the tarts there on the table. Let the jury consider their verdict.
No, sentence first, verdict afterwards.
Stuff and nonsense. The idea of having the sentence first.
Hold your tongue.
I won't.
Oh, off with her head.
Who cares for you? You're all nothing but a pack of cards.
At this, the whole pack of playing cards rose up into the air and came flying down upon her.
Oh!
Alice gave a little scream, half of fright and half of anger, and tried to beat them off, and found herself lying on the bank with her head in the lap of her sister, who was gently brushing away some dead leaves that had fluttered down from the trees upon her face.
Wake up, Alice, dear. Why, what a long sleep you've had.
Oh, Helen, I've had such a curious dream. All about a white rabbit and a caterpillar sitting on a mushroom, and the March Hare and the King and Queen of Hearts, and the Frog Footman and the Duchess, and the Mock Turtle. It sounded just like a cow mooing. And there was a trial, and one of the jurymen was a lizard named Bill.
It must have been a curious dream, Alice, dear, certainly. But now run into your tea. It's getting late.
So Alice got up and ran off, thinking while she ran What a wonderful dream it had been. But her sister sat still, just as she had left her, leaning her head on her hand, watching the setting sun, and thinking of little Alice and all her wonderful adventures. And she pictured to herself how this same little sister of hers would in the aftertime be herself a grown woman, and how she would keep the simple and loving heart of her childhood, and how she would gather about her other little children, and make their eyes bright and eager with many a strange tale, perhaps even with the dream of Wonderland of long ago, and how she would find a pleasure in all their simple joys and the happy summer days.